The crisp evening air carried the scent of oak and freshly cut grass as Olivia pulled up to the grand estate where she had spent much of her childhood. The house was as imposing as ever, with its towering pillars and sprawling driveway, a testament to the wealth and power her father, Robert, had accumulated over the years. It had always been a place of mixed emotions for her, but tonight, as she stepped out of her sleek black sedan, she felt nothing but a quiet determination. She smoothed the fabric of her navy blue dress, adjusting the delicate gold bracelet on her wrist. She had come expecting an update on the company she had poured years of her life into, her rightful legacy. Instead, she found herself walking into what felt like a staged performance, a gathering designed to humiliate her in ways she hadn't even begun to grasp. The living room was filled with laughter and clinking glasses, a warm glow cast by the chandelier above. Familiar faces, family members, business associates, and old friends milled about, engaged in polite conversation. At the center of it all stood Robert, the man who had taught her everything she knew about business, the man she had spent years trying to impress, to earn his approval. He looked as composed as ever, his suit impeccably tailored, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Vanessa, his new wife, radiated smug satisfaction. Olivia had never liked the woman, though she had never openly voiced her disdain. Vanessa had wormed her way into Robert's life with a kind of calculated grace, always positioning herself and her daughter, Madison, as indispensable. Olivia had suspected for a long time that Vanessa had her own agenda, but she had never imagined the extent of it until now. Robert cleared his throat, commanding the attention of the room. The chatter died down, and Olivia felt the weight of every gaze settling on them. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady, practiced. "As you all know, I've been making some important decisions regarding the future of the company. After careful consideration, I've decided that it's time for a new direction, one that ensures our family legacy continues to grow." Olivia folded her arms, waiting. She had heard this speech before, in boardrooms and press conferences. But something about the way Vanessa's lips curled into a barely contained smile sent a chill up her spine. Robert turned to her then, his eyes cool and detached. "Olivia," he said, and for a moment, she thought he was about to acknowledge her contributions, her hard work. Instead, his next words shattered the illusion entirely. "I have decided to transfer your inheritance and your stake in the company to Madison." The words echoed in her mind, slow and deliberate, as if her brain refused to process them all at once. The room was silent now, every eye trained on her, waiting for her reaction. She blinked. Once, twice. Madison, standing beside Vanessa, had the audacity to look surprised. Then delighted. "She needs it more than you," Robert continued, his tone final, dismissive. Vanessa exhaled a pleased sigh, her hand resting possessively on Robert's arm, as if to silently reinforce her triumph. For a moment, Olivia felt the air leave her lungs. It was like being punched without warning, the impact landing deep in her chest. She had spent years proving herself, working tirelessly to expand the company, ensuring its growth, its reputation. And now, with a few words, everything had been stripped away. She could feel the eyes of the crowd, the hushed murmurs that followed, the quiet gasp from an aunt who had always favored her. But Olivia refused to break. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. So, she smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that made Vanessa's smug expression falter, that made Robert's gaze flicker with something uncertainty, perhaps. She nodded once, as if this news were merely another business update, another item to be filed away in the back of her mind. "I see," she said calmly. She reached for the champagne flute on the table beside her, lifting it in an effortless gesture. The room watched in stunned silence as she took a slow sip, then placed the glass back down with meticulous care. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. She didn't stop to look at Robert, at Madison, or at Vanessa's now uncertain smirk. She didn't pause to acknowledge the whispers or the looks of pity thrown her way. She simply walked, each step controlled, measured, as if she were the one making the decision to leave, rather than being cast aside. It wasn't until she reached the cool night air outside that she allowed herself to breathe. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel, but her mind was sharper than ever. This was not the end. No, this was only the beginning. The betrayal stung, yes. But Olivia had never been one to let pain destroy her. She would use it. She would let it fuel her. And when the time was right, when she had built something even greater than what Robert had stolen from her, she would look back on this night not with bitterness, but with gratitude. The city lights blurred as Olivia drove, her fingers gripping the steering wheel with a quiet intensity. She should have felt rage, despair, something explosive. Instead, there was only a hollow stillness inside her, a quiet storm gathering momentum beneath the surface. The betrayal had been swift, cold, and absolute. And yet, she had walked away without a single word of protest, leaving behind an entire room of people confused by her silence. But she had learned a long time ago that emotions had no place in negotiations. Weakness was a currency she refused to trade in. And if her father thought he had seen the last of her, if Vanessa and Madison believed they had won, well, they were about to learn just how patient she could be. Instead of returning home, she found herself navigating toward an office she had been to countless times before. A place that, unlike her father's house, had always felt familiar. Safe. Virgil's law firm stood in a towering glass building downtown, sleek and modern, yet with a quiet sense of history. Virgil had been the family attorney since before Olivia was born, a man who had handled everything from legal disputes to estate planning with the precision of a surgeon. The receptionist recognized her immediately, offering a polite nod before pressing a button on the phone. "Ms. Hayes is here to see Mr. Calloway." Within minutes, she was ushered into the private office, where Virgil Calloway sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his silver-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose as he looked up from a document. He was an older man now, but his mind was sharper than ever. He took one look at Olivia's composed expression and sighed. "I heard about the announcement." She didn't bother with small talk. "Then you know why I'm here." Virgil gestured for her to sit, but Olivia remained standing. She needed to feel grounded, to keep her control intact. "I want to know if what he did was even legal," she stated flatly. "I dedicated years to that company. There were agreements in place. Contracts. He can't just." Virgil held up a hand. "Legally, your father has every right to pass control of the company to whomever he chooses. It was in his name. But..." He hesitated, something rare for him. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "But what?" He sighed again, leaning back in his chair. "There's something I've never told you. Something I was instructed to withhold until the right moment." She stilled, her grip tightening against the back of the chair in front of her. "Instructed? By who?" Virgil's gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. "Your grandmother, Eleanor." The name sent a jolt through her. Eleanor Hayes had been a force of nature, fierce, intelligent, and utterly fearless. Olivia had idolized her, growing up in her shadow, learning from her stories of resilience and ambition. When she passed away, Olivia had mourned not just the loss of a grandmother, but the loss of a mentor, the only person who had truly understood her hunger to succeed. Virgil slid open a drawer, pulling out a thick file. "Your father didn't inherit all of Eleanor's wealth when she passed," he revealed. "She left something specifically for you." Olivia's heart pounded as he flipped open the file, revealing neatly typed documents with Eleanor Hayes' signature stamped in bold ink. "A trust fund," Virgil continued. $5 million. Set aside in your name. But there was a condition. Olivia could barely breathe. $5 million? And she had never known? "What condition?" she demanded. Virgil tapped the paper. "Eleanor wanted to ensure you weren't handed success on a silver platter. She believed in your ability to build something on your own, just as she did. The trust would only become accessible once you proved yourself, by building a successful business from the ground up." Olivia exhaled sharply, absorbing the words. It was exactly the kind of challenge Eleanor would have set for her. A test of grit, determination, and resilience. "Why didn't I know about this before?" she asked. "Your grandmother wanted you to fight for your success without the promise of a safety net." She believed that true legacy wasn't just inherited, it was created. "If I had told you about this earlier, she worried you might take an easier path." That wasn't her way, and she knew it wasn't yours either. Olivia ran a hand through her hair, trying to process it all. $5 million. A sum that could change everything, and yet, it remained just out of reach. She had to earn it. Virgil studied her carefully. "Your father doesn't know," he added. Olivia's head snapped up. "What?" "Robert wasn't included in the specifics of the trust," Virgil explained. "Eleanor didn't trust him to make the right choices. She left it entirely in your hands." A slow, genuine smile spread across Olivia's face. Her father had dismissed her, cast her aside as if she were disposable. He believed he had taken everything from her. But Eleanor had ensured that Olivia still had a future entirely independent of him. A different kind of fire ignited within her. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about proving, to herself and to the world, that she was more than Robert Hayes' daughter. She was her own force, her own empire in the making. "So," she said, exhaling as she straightened her posture, "I have to build something first." Virgil nodded. "Something successful. Something real." Olivia turned toward the window, gazing out at the glittering skyline. The city was full of opportunities, of potential. She had spent years expanding her father's empire, making business decisions that had led to million-dollar profits that, in the end, meant nothing to him. But now, she had a chance to build something of her own. And this time, no one would take it from her. "Good," she murmured. She turned back to Virgil, her expression determined. "I'll do it." Virgil chuckled. "I never had any doubt." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an old business contact, one she hadn't spoken to in months. "We need to catch up. I have an idea I think you'd be interested in." Olivia's pulse quickened. Fate, it seemed, was aligning in her favor. "Thank you, Virgil," she said, reaching for the file. "For everything." He nodded, watching as she turned and strode toward the door. As she stepped into the night, the cold air felt different, bracing, invigorating. She had walked away from her father's betrayal, but now she was walking toward something greater. And this time, she would build it with her own hands. The aroma of freshly brewed espresso filled the air as Olivia sat across from Sophie in a quiet, upscale cafe in the heart of the city. The wooden interior, decorated with hanging plants and warm lighting, was familiar, a place where she and Sophie had met countless times before to discuss work, life, and everything in between. But tonight was different. Tonight, they weren't here for casual conversation or friendly catch-ups. Tonight, they were here to lay the foundation for war. Olivia stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her mind already moving 10 steps ahead. Sophie, ever perceptive, tapped a perfectly manicured nail against the rim of her mug. "You're thinking too much," Sophie said, her voice a mixture of amusement and concern. "I know that face. That's your, I'm about to destroy someone face." Olivia smirked but said nothing. She had spent the past 24 hours planning, strategizing, preparing for what was to come. There was no room for emotions, only action. "You're really not going to fight him?" Sophie asked, leaning in. "Not even legally?" Olivia took a slow sip of her coffee before setting the cup down with measured grace. "No," she said finally. "Let them think they've won. Let them think I've accepted my fate." Sophie raised a brow. "That's cold. I like it." A small smile played on Olivia's lips. "They expect me to lash out, to fight, to beg. I won't give them the satisfaction. I'll let them celebrate while I build something bigger than they ever imagined. And when they finally realize what I've done, it'll be too late." Sophie leaned back in her seat, considering her words. "All right. So, what's the plan?" Olivia reached into her bag, pulling out a sleek black notebook and flipping it open to the first page. Scribbled notes, ideas, and business strategies covered the crisp white sheets. She had spent the entire night outlining every step, every possibility. I'm going to launch an eco-friendly packaging company, Olivia said confidently. Sophie's eyebrows shot up. Sustainability is huge right now. You're thinking long-term. Olivia nodded. It's not just about the market. It's about building something that matters. Something with purpose. Sophie tapped her chin thoughtfully. You're going to need funding. Connections. Investors who believe in this idea as much as you do. Olivia smiled. I've already started reaching out. There are companies looking to switch to sustainable packaging, but the costs have always been the issue. If I can create an affordable, scalable model, I can corner the market before anyone realizes what's happening. Sophie let out a low whistle. You're not playing around. Olivia's expression turned steely. I don't have the luxury of playing around. The betrayal still burned in the back of her mind, but she refused to let it consume her. Instead, she would use it. Let it drive her. Let it shape the empire she was about to build. Sophie leaned in, lowering her voice. You know Madison and Vanessa won't just sit back and let you win, right? They'll come after you. Hard. Olivia's eyes darkened. I'm counting on it. She knew them too well. Vanessa was cunning, manipulative, always looking for ways to secure her position. Madison, on the other hand, was impulsive and entitled. She had never built anything in her life, and now she was about to be handed the keys to a kingdom she didn't know how to rule. It was only a matter of time before she made mistakes. I want them to underestimate me, Olivia continued. I want them to think I've walked away, that I'm nothing more than a bitter daughter licking her wounds. And then, when they least expect it, I'll be standing at the top of an empire they never saw coming. Sophie exhaled, shaking her head with admiration. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Olivia smirked. Smart choice. They spent the next 2 hours discussing logistics. Sophie, with her vast network of business connections, agreed to introduce Olivia to potential investors and partners. Olivia, in turn, detailed the steps she would take to build her company from the ground up. By the time they left the cafe, the plan was in motion. But Olivia knew this was just the beginning. Meanwhile, back at the Hayes estate, Vanessa sat in the dimly lit study, her fingers gripping a glass of expensive wine as she replayed the events of the previous night in her mind. Olivia's reaction, her lack of reaction, bothered her. She just walked away, Vanessa murmured, tapping her perfectly polished nails against the crystal glass. Madison, lounging on the couch, let out a scoff. She's probably crying somewhere. I mean, what else can she do? Vanessa wasn't convinced. She had spent years studying people, learning their weaknesses, knowing when to press and when to pull back. And Olivia had always been different. Calculated. Strategic. No, Vanessa said slowly. She's planning something. Madison rolled her eyes. Oh, please. What's she going to do? She has nothing. No money. No company. Dad cut her off completely. Vanessa swirled her wine, deep in thought. People like Olivia don't just disappear. She has something up her sleeve. And I intend to find out what it is. Madison huffed, tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder. Even if she does, she can't touch us. Dad made sure of that. But Vanessa wasn't so sure. She set her glass down and reached for her phone. It's time we start keeping an eye on Olivia. I want to know who she's meeting with, what she's planning. If she's trying to make a comeback, we'll crush her before she even gets the chance. Madison smirked. Now you're speaking my language. Vanessa's lips curled into a slow, satisfied smile. Let the game begin. Back in her apartment, Olivia sat at her desk, staring at the business proposal she had spent the last few hours refining. She knew she was walking into a battlefield, but this time, she wasn't just playing defense. She was going on the offensive. She glanced at her phone. A message from a well-known venture capitalist flashed across the screen. Let's talk. Your idea has potential. A slow smile spread across her lips. Madison and Vanessa thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. The scent of fresh ink and coffee filled Olivia's small, makeshift office, a stark contrast to the glass-walled boardrooms she had once commanded. This space wasn't glamorous. The walls were bare, the furniture second-hand, and the lighting dim, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the work. She ran her fingers over the printed proposal on her desk, her eyes scanning the numbers, projections, and market analysis for the 100th time. Every detail had to be perfect. Investors didn't care about dreams. They cared about results, about numbers that proved viability. And Olivia refused to give them a single reason to doubt her. Her phone buzzed. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. "Good news," Sophie said the moment Olivia answered. "I got you a meeting with Raymond Cross." Olivia sat up straighter. Cross was a major player in the sustainability sector, an angel investor who had built multiple eco-friendly brands from the ground up. His name alone carried weight, and if he believed in her idea, others would follow. When? Olivia asked, already mentally rearranging her schedule. "Tomorrow afternoon." "He's interested, Liv. This could be big." Olivia exhaled. Tomorrow. That gave her less than 24 hours to refine her pitch. "I won't waste this opportunity," she promised. The first meeting. The next afternoon, Olivia found herself in a sleek, modern office overlooking the city skyline. Raymond Cross sat across from her, his sharp blue eyes scanning the proposal she had handed him minutes ago. He was a man in his early 50s, with a calm but commanding presence, the kind of investor who had seen every kind of entrepreneur walk through his doors, dreamers, con artists, and the rare few who actually made things happen. "Your concept is strong," Cross finally said, setting the document down. "Sustainable packaging is a growing industry, and your cost-efficient model is compelling. But my concern is execution. You don't have manufacturing partners yet. No infrastructure." Olivia expected this. "That's why I'm here," she said confidently. "With your backing, I can secure the right partnerships. I've already had preliminary discussions with several manufacturers willing to pivot to biodegradable materials. I just need the capital to bring it all together." Cross studied her. "And why should I back you, Olivia? You've got a strong background in business, but you're stepping into a completely new sector. What makes you think you can pull this off?" Olivia met his gaze without hesitation. "Because I don't have the option to fail. This isn't a side project for me, it's my future. My name, my reputation, my entire career depends on making this work. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen." A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, crossed his face. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," he admitted. A beat of silence passed before he leaned forward. "All right. I'll fund the initial round. 50,000. It's not a fortune, but it'll get you started. Prove to me that you can land a major client, and we'll talk about further investment." The air seemed to shift around Olivia. 50,000. It wasn't enough to scale a full operation yet, but it was enough to begin. Enough to get her foot in the door. She extended her hand. "You won't regret this." Cross shook it, a knowing smirk on his lips. "I certainly hope not." Laying the foundation. With funding secured, Olivia moved fast. She worked around the clock, building connections with manufacturers who specialized in biodegradable packaging. It wasn't easy. Most of them hesitated at the thought of switching production lines for a startup with no proven track record. But Olivia didn't take no for an answer. She leveraged every contact she had, every favor she was owed. Slowly, one by one, she convinced them that EcoPack Solutions wasn't just another startup, it was the future. Sophie handled networking, setting up meetings with potential distributors and retailers who might be willing to take a chance on her products. Every evening, they worked late into the night, refining proposals, running market tests, ensuring that when the time came to pitch to clients, they would be ready. Still, Olivia knew none of this would matter without a major deal. One contract, one major retailer willing to take a risk, and the momentum would shift in her favor. And then, one morning, she got the call. "We're interested," the voice on the other end said. It was Jonathan Pierce, the CEO of Green Earth Grocers, a well-known chain dedicated to sustainability. "Your numbers look promising. We've been looking for an affordable packaging alternative that aligns with our brand values. If you can meet our supply requirements, we're willing to negotiate a contract." Olivia clenched her fist beneath the desk, steadying herself. This was it. Let's set up a meeting, she said, keeping her voice calm despite the storm of excitement brewing inside her. Robert's company begins to falter. Meanwhile, across the city, Robert Hayes sat in his office, reviewing quarterly financial reports with a deepening frown. The numbers weren't good. Under Madison's leadership, the company had seen a sharp decline in efficiency. Customer satisfaction rates were dropping, supply chain issues were piling up, and investors were growing restless. Madison, of course, brushed off concerns with her usual arrogance, convinced that the Hayes name alone was enough to maintain control. Robert knew better. Vanessa, sensing the tension, tried to keep him distracted. "It's just a rough quarter," she insisted. "These things happen." But Robert had built his empire on instinct, on knowing when to act and when to pull back. And right now, every instinct told him that something was off. Then came the whispers. Investors, suppliers, people who had once been loyal to the Hayes Corporation were starting to talk about a new player in the market. A startup that was rapidly gaining traction in the sustainable packaging industry. A name that, when Robert finally heard it, sent a wave of unease through him. EcoPack Solutions. He stared at the name for a long time before setting the report down. Olivia. She wasn't done. And for the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into his mind. Had he made a mistake? The first major deal. A week later, Olivia stood in the Green Earth Grocers headquarters, presenting her final pitch. She had spent days refining every detail, ensuring that her business model, supply chain, and pricing structure were airtight. Jonathan Pierce listened intently, nodding as she spoke. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then he smiled. "We'll move forward with a contract," he said. "A trial run in 30 locations. If it performs well, we'll expand to all 200. Olivia exhaled, gripping the table beneath her hands. She had done it. This wasn't just a deal, it was a turning point. As she walked out of the building, her phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "Vanessa and Madison are asking around about you. They're starting to panic." Olivia smirked. "Good. Let them panic." This was just the beginning. The morning sun bathed Olivia's office in a golden hue, reflecting off the sleek, minimalist desk she had carefully curated for her new space. It wasn't the high-rise luxury she had once occupied under her father's company, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every decision, every contract signed, she had built it from the ground up. Her laptop screen displayed the finalized contract with Green Earth Grocers, their signatures stamped in bold ink. The trial phase would begin in 30 locations, and if her product met expectations, they would roll it out nationwide. This was it. The moment that shifted everything. She leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. Months of tireless effort, sleepless nights, and strategic planning had brought her here. She wasn't just rebuilding, she was rising, stronger than before. And now it was time to push harder. Her phone buzzed. Sophie's name flashed across the screen. "Liv, check the industry news." Now. A sense of anticipation rushed through her as she switched tabs, her eyes scanning the latest headlines. EcoPack Solutions secures landmark deal with Green Earth Grocers. Emerging competitor Olivia Hayes shakes up the sustainable packaging industry. She smirked. The media had taken notice. Then, another message popped up, this time from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Call me. R. Robert." Olivia stared at the initials for a long moment before locking her phone. Let him wait. He had made his choice. She turned back to her desk, pulling up a list of potential clients. The Green Earth deal was monumental, but she wasn't stopping there. She would make sure that by the time Robert and Madison realized what was happening, she would be too far ahead to stop. Madison and Vanessa's desperation. Across town, Vanessa paced the length of the study, her wine glass untouched on the desk. Madison sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face pale. "Did you see the article?" Vanessa hissed, her voice sharp with irritation. Madison nodded, gripping her phone tighter. "Everyone's talking about it. Investors are starting to ask questions. Some of Dad's old partners are saying they want to explore other options. Vanessa turned to face her stepdaughter, her expression cold. Do you understand what this means? Olivia isn't just bouncing back, she's coming for everything. Madison scoffed, trying to play it off, but there was a crack in her bravado. It's just one deal. We still control the Hayes Corporation. Dad trusts me. Vanessa gave her a pointed look. You're losing control, Madison. If Olivia keeps gaining momentum, people will start looking at you differently. They'll start questioning whether Robert made the right choice. Madison's jaw tightened. So what do you want me to do? Sabotage her? Vanessa didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the desk and picked up her phone. We need leverage. Information. Something that will make her look weak in the eyes of her investors. Madison frowned. And how exactly do we get that? Vanessa smirked. We find out who she's working with. Everyone has weaknesses. Even Olivia. The attempted smear campaign. A week later, Olivia sat in a meeting with her team, reviewing the launch strategy for their partnership with Green Earth. The demand was already growing, with other retailers expressing interest. Then, Sophie burst into the room, her face tense. Liv, we have a problem. Olivia's stomach clenched. What happened? Sophie placed a tablet on the table, pulling up an industry blog. The headline made Olivia's blood run cold. Is EcoPack Solutions financially stable? Sources question the viability of Olivia Hayes' company. Olivia snatched the tablet, skimming through the article. It was filled with vague accusations. Claims that her company was overpromising, that her funding sources were questionable, that she lacked the experience to handle large-scale operations. There's no real evidence, Sophie said, but it doesn't matter. The damage is already being done. Olivia exhaled, controlling the anger bubbling inside her. She knew exactly where this was coming from. Vanessa and Madison. They were playing dirty. Good. That meant they were afraid. She looked up at Sophie. Schedule an interview with Business Weekly. I want to address this directly. Sophie grinned. You're going to fight back. Olivia's eyes darkened. No. I'm going to bury them. Olivia's public response. 2 days later, Olivia sat in front of a camera at Business Weekly's studio, dressed in a navy power suit, exuding confidence. The journalist, Mark Davidson, leaned forward, an interested gleam in his eyes. Ms. Hayes, there have been recent concerns about EcoPack Solutions' ability to deliver on its promises. How do you respond to critics questioning your company's stability? Olivia smiled, calm, unshaken. Every disruptive business faces skepticism. That's the nature of innovation. But here's what matters. EcoPack Solutions has secured a deal with one of the leading sustainable grocery chains. We've met every requirement, and our financials are solid. Anyone questioning our stability should take a closer look at the companies that have to resort to anonymous rumors to stay relevant. Davidson smirked. You seem to be implying that these rumors have a particular source. Olivia didn't hesitate. I don't believe in wasting time on speculation. My focus is on results. And if certain individuals are worried about what I'm building, they should be. Because we're just getting started. The interview went viral within hours. Investors rallied behind Olivia, sending a clear message: she wasn't someone they could tear down with cheap tactics. And then, the unexpected happened. Robert's company begins to crumble. At the Hayes Corporation, the fallout from Olivia's success and the failed smear campaign was evident. Madison was struggling to maintain control. Clients were pulling out, employees were growing dissatisfied, and the board of directors had started whispering behind closed doors. Then, the environmental violation reports surfaced. Robert's company had been cutting corners, overlooking certain regulations to save costs. And now, an investigation was underway. The headlines were merciless. Hayes Corporation faces scrutiny over environmental violations. Madison Hayes' leadership under fire. The company's stock plummeted. Investors panicked. And Robert, who had once believed that giving Madison control was his greatest decision, now sat in his office, staring at reports that told a very different story. His company was falling apart. And Olivia? She was thriving. The call that changed everything. Olivia sat in her office, reviewing expansion plans, when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Robert. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. Then, slowly, she picked up. A heavy silence filled the line before he finally spoke. Olivia. She leaned back in her chair, savoring the moment. Robert. A long pause. Then, finally, his voice, strained, uncertain. I made a mistake. Olivia smiled. She had won. And now he knew it too. The weight of Robert's voice lingered in the air, but Olivia remained composed. She refused to let the moment overwhelm her. The man who had dismissed her, who had stripped her of what was rightfully hers, now sat on the other end of the line, admitting, however reluctantly, that he had been wrong. She could almost picture him, sitting at his grand mahogany desk, staring at the financial reports detailing the rapid downfall of the Hayes Corporation. The empire he had built, the company he had chosen to hand over to Madison instead of her, was now unraveling before his eyes. I assume this isn't just a courtesy call, Olivia said, keeping her voice cool. A sigh. I need to see you, Robert said, his voice heavy with something she had never heard before, uncertainty. Olivia considered it for a long moment. The younger version of herself would have jumped at the opportunity, eager for an ounce of approval, for any sign that she was finally being seen. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She had built something greater than his validation. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers against the desk. I'll think about it, she said, before hanging up. Robert Hayes was no longer in control. She was. Meanwhile, at the Hayes Corporation, chaos reigned. The environmental scandal had shaken the company to its core. Investigators were digging into years of regulatory shortcuts, and the board of directors was panicking. Clients were dropping out, citing concerns over the company's reputation. Madison sat in Robert's office, her face pale as she read the latest headlines. Hayes Corporation under investigation for environmental violations. Investors lose confidence as company faces potential lawsuits. She turned to her father, her voice frantic. We need to do something. This is getting out of control. Robert rubbed his temples. His once formidable presence was diminished, weighed down by the realization of how badly he had miscalculated. His voice was tired, distant. No, Madison. You were supposed to be in control. Madison flinched. You were the one who gave me the company. And you were the one who ran it into the ground. The words hit like a slap. Madison opened her mouth, but no excuses came. She had been so certain that bearing the Hayes name was enough. That the power and prestige of the company would sustain itself. But Olivia had proved her wrong. And now, she was losing everything. Vanessa, who had remained quiet through the meeting, finally spoke. Maybe it's time we consider alternative solutions. Robert turned his tired eyes to her. Such as? Vanessa tilted her head, her lips curling into something that might have been a smirk. Perhaps it's time we negotiate with Olivia. Robert's jaw tightened. Negotiate? Madison scoffed. Absolutely not. We don't need her. Vanessa gave her a pointed look. Then tell me, Madison, what is your solution? Silence. Because she didn't have one. At EcoPack Solutions, Olivia was moving forward with new expansion plans. The Green Earth trial phase had exceeded expectations. The company's packaging solutions had not only been successful, but had caught the attention of other major players in the industry. Her phone buzzed with a new email from an executive at Fresh Harvest Markets, another national grocery chain. They wanted a meeting. Sophie walked into the office, a knowing smile on her face. You've seen the news, haven't you? Olivia smirked. Which part? The collapsing stock? The lawsuits? The board turning on Robert? All of the above, Sophie said, sitting on the edge of the desk. Madison and Vanessa must be losing their minds. They should be, Olivia said, her voice calm. Because they underestimated me. Sophie's eyes gleamed. And now Robert wants to meet with you. Olivia exhaled. Of course, he does. He wouldn't be calling unless he was desperate. Sophie studied her for a moment. Are you going to do it? Olivia tapped her fingers against the desk. Not yet. I want them to sweat a little longer. She had no intention of rushing to his rescue. Not after what he had done. Not after the betrayal. Days passed, and the Hayes Corporation's situation worsened. Vanessa's carefully curated public image was cracking. The media had begun investigating her financial history, and rumors circulated about her quietly selling off assets. She was preparing to abandon ship. Madison, on the other hand, was spiraling. She had never faced failure before. And now, for the first time in her life, she was realizing that a last name wasn't enough to guarantee success. In desperation, she reached out to an old contact, a PR consultant who specialized in crisis management. "What do we do?" she asked, gripping her phone tightly. The response was blunt. "You need a scapegoat." And just like that, Madison found her way out. A week later, the media exploded with a new headline. Madison Hayes blames former executives for company's downfall, files legal action against past leadership. Olivia read the article with a slow shake of her head. Sophie, sitting across from her, laughed. "She's throwing people under the bus." It was predictable, Olivia mused. She's trying to save herself. But it wouldn't work. The board of directors had already turned against Madison. And Robert? He was losing whatever power he had left. Olivia knew the next call was coming. And when it did, she answered. Robert's voice was hollow. "Olivia, we need to talk." She let a few seconds pass before responding. "And why is that?" A long pause. Then, finally, the words. "Because I need your help." There it was. The final moment. Robert Hayes, the man who had once told her she wasn't needed, was now asking for her help. She let the silence stretch before saying, "I'll meet you tomorrow." This time, she would be the one making the decisions. This time, he would be the one waiting. The city skyline stretched before Olivia as she stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office. The glass reflected her composed expression, her power suit crisp, every detail of her appearance carefully curated. Today was significant. Today, she would meet the man who had once dismissed her, who had stripped her of her rightful place. Robert Hayes. Her phone vibrated on the desk. A message from Sophie. His car just pulled up. "Are you ready?" Olivia exhaled, smoothing her blazer. "I've been ready for a long time." The past year had been a battlefield. She had watched the empire Robert built crumble under Madison's incompetence. She had seen Vanessa flee the moment things got too messy. And now, Robert, the once untouchable businessman, was walking through her doors, forced to face the consequences of his choices. There was something poetic about it. She turned as the elevator doors slid open. Robert stepped out, his usual imposing presence dulled by exhaustion. His suit, once tailored to perfection, seemed looser, as if he had lost weight. His face, lined with stress, lacked the sharp authority it once held. For the first time in her life, Olivia saw not the titan of industry, not the father who had never fully acknowledged her worth, but a man who had been broken by his own arrogance. He hesitated before stepping fully into her office. "Olivia." She motioned toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit." Robert obeyed. The sight was almost surreal. The man who had built an empire now sat across from her, not as a leader, but as someone asking for a lifeline. A long silence stretched between them. Olivia let him sit in it. Let him feel the weight of his choices. Finally, he exhaled. "I won't waste your time. I made a mistake." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Which one?" Robert's jaw tightened. He had never been one to admit fault. The words must have felt foreign on his tongue. "Giving Madison control. Sidelining you. I thought I was protecting the company, but I was wrong." Olivia leaned back in her chair. "You weren't protecting the company. You were protecting your ego." Robert's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't argue. Instead, he rubbed a hand over his face. "Hayes Corporation is falling apart." "I know," Olivia said simply. Robert looked at her, searching for something, perhaps a flicker of sympathy, of recognition. He found none. "I need your help," he admitted, the words strained, reluctant. Olivia studied him for a moment. The years had stripped him of his invincibility, but she wasn't here for closure. She wasn't here to console him. She was here to make it clear that she no longer needed him. She folded her hands on the desk. "Why should I help you?" Robert inhaled sharply. "Because this company." She cut him off. "The company you took from me." He looked away for a second, as if ashamed. Yes. Olivia let the silence linger. She wanted to watch him squirm. To make him understand, even for a moment, how it had felt to be discarded so easily. Then she leaned forward, her voice cool, measured. "You made your choice, Robert. You gave my inheritance, my stake, my place, to someone who was unprepared to lead. And now, you want me to clean up your mess?" Robert swallowed hard. "You can save it, Olivia." A sharp laugh escaped her lips. "Save it? Why would I want to? EcoPack Solutions is thriving. I don't need the Hayes Corporation." Robert's fingers curled against his knee. "It's our family legacy." Olivia arched a brow. It was our family legacy. And then you handed it to someone who didn't earn it." His gaze flickered, the reality sinking in. Still, he tried one last effort. "You don't have to make a decision right away. Just think about it." Olivia stood, signaling that the conversation was over. "I already have." Robert hesitated before rising to his feet. For the first time in his life, he looked at her not as his daughter, not as someone seeking his approval, but as an equal, or perhaps, someone he had never truly known. His voice was quieter now. "So that's it?" Olivia's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Robert exhaled, nodding slowly. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Olivia sat back down, the weight of the moment settling over her. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was simply the final nail in the coffin of the past. She had built something greater than Robert had ever envisioned for her. And now, she was truly free. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow across Olivia's office as she sat at her desk, running her fingers along the edges of an envelope with Virgil Calloway's name stamped on it. It had arrived earlier that morning, delivered by a courier with strict instructions to place it in her hands. Virgil, her grandmother's lawyer. She knew what this was before she even opened it. Taking a slow breath, she unfolded the letter inside, the familiar penmanship of her late grandmother, Eleanor Hayes, bringing a rush of memories. "My dearest Olivia, if you are reading this, it means you have done what I always knew you would. You have built your own path, not because it was handed to you, but because you fought for it. That is the mark of true success. That is the difference between those who inherit power and those who create it. I have waited for this moment. I knew it would come. And now it is time to honor the legacy I have left for you." Enclosed was the final document, the activation of her trust fund. $5 million untouched, waiting for her. A part of her expected to feel some overwhelming rush of victory, some final wave of validation. But all she felt was peace. She set the letter down and stared out at the skyline. She didn't need the money. Not anymore. The weight of choice. Olivia turned to the framed news article on the wall, a feature on EcoPack Solutions, her company, now a major player in the sustainable packaging industry. She had built this empire without Robert, without the Hayes Corporation. And as she stared at her reflection in the glass, she realized that the fortune her grandmother had set aside for her was no longer about security or success. It was about what came next. She glanced at the document again. $5 million. What could she do with it? The answer came almost immediately. Not what she could do for herself. What she could do for others. The Eleanor Foundation. A week later, Olivia sat in a press conference, the cameras flashing as she took her place at the podium. The room was packed, investors, journalists, business leaders. They had come expecting an announcement about a new expansion, a merger, another calculated business move. What they got instead was something far greater. Olivia placed her hands on the podium and spoke clearly. "I stand here today not as an entrepreneur, not as a CEO, but as a woman who understands what it means to fight for her place in the world. There are countless young women out there with vision, talent, and ambition. Women who, like me, have been told no more times than they can count. Women who just need someone to believe in them. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. That's why I am proud to announce the launch of the Eleanor Foundation, dedicated to empowering female entrepreneurs by providing mentorship, funding, and resources to help them build businesses of their own. The room stirred, murmurs of approval and excitement filling the air. She continued, "This foundation is not just about financial support, it's about creating opportunities where there were none. It's about ensuring that no woman has to wait for permission to succeed." The applause started slow, then swelled into something thunderous. Sophie, sitting in the front row, gave her a knowing smile. She had done it. Not just for herself. For everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. The final chapter. That evening, Olivia sat in her penthouse, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Her phone buzzed with messages of congratulations, invitations to collaborate, offers from business leaders who suddenly saw her as more than just Robert Hayes' daughter. She ignored them all. Instead, she turned her attention to a single name in her contacts list. Robert Hayes. She hovered over it for a moment, then, with a quiet finality, she deleted the number. Her story with him was over. Her future was just beginning. She picked up her glass of wine and raised it slightly, as if in a silent toast to the woman who had believed in her from the very beginning. Her grandmother had been right. Legacy wasn't about what you inherited. It was about what you created. And Olivia Hayes had created something that would last forever.